All right, I'm going to start the recording because we have several who couldn't be here. So I'll send the recording, and I've got this microphone set up where it also records on the backside, so it'll pick some of y'all up when you're talking, if so they can hear questions and stuff. And then and I'll just send that to our members, so it's not like it's going to be in the public where anybody can get to it. But today anybody have any questions from the last time when we talked about the first folder stuff?
I didn't understand the phrase first folder. I don't have a folder unless you mean this purple thing.
Well, the first folder, the forms for the first folder are in the table of contents you'll see there. The first folder is my way of saying here are the first documents to get together. And last week we had the first folder checklist as one of the pages that we looked at. Yeah. Yeah, it's on. You go on a couple more pages there, I think, and you'll see it.
The only thing about long-term care is that some of the facilities you have to go in,
Yeah.
Okay.
they don't really care about the patient.
Yeah, and that's part of, when it comes to long-term care, one of the strategies is to go in, to plan ahead enough so that persons go into a facility private pay. Because then you have access to the higher level of care, even if it's not the highest level of care. And many of the places who allow you to come in private pay will allow you to stay if after a certain amount of time you end up on Medicaid. They will then allow you to have one of their Medicaid beds, because what happens is a lot of facilities, in order to not go bankrupt as a business, they can't have all Medicaid beds. So they can't dedicate every room to Medicaid because they get paid on the lowest level with Medicaid. And so what they do is they have a percentage of their rooms dedicated to the Medicaid supported patients, or residents really. And then if you go in private pay and they say you're there 6 months or whatever their standard is, then if you're there, like my grandma didn't have to move out of her facility, and she was on Medicaid for 8 days, but we weren't getting ready, if she hadn't died, we weren't getting ready to have to move her. She was just going to go from paying the private pay amount to them getting the Medicaid amount. They would allow her to stay. So that's one reason to plan long-term care ahead and to make moves sooner rather than later. It's like I worked with one family, and their mom lived in Franklin County, they're above Wake County. And the first Medicaid bed they could find when she got out of the hospital was in Robertson County, way down to Fayetteville, because the Medicaid beds were all gone. And obviously there are some Medicaid facilities, that don't limit their limit, and they're in communities that are very supportive. And when a Medicaid facility is in a community that's very supported, then those facilities get supplemented with nonprofit and church and other support. And so you have a facility like my cousin's in Arkansas, where because the community is so supportive of the community, because they're all their people, it's Aunt so-and-so and my neighbor so-and-so who are there. And so
Volunteers.
Yeah, it's volunteers and donations. Like, why is it that facility is cleaner than a Medicaid facility typically is? And it's because they supplement the amount of work done to keep it up. So they have some nice artwork, and they have grounds that are kept up nicer. And the budget, it doesn't really have space based on what they're paid by Medicaid, but it has space based on everything that is donated. And so it's who supports the facility. And that's one of my dreams, is that Medicaid facilities get adopted, and then even the workers there, like back then, the last one I checked, if you're getting paid $9 an hour to do the most intimate personal care for people, it's not always the people that are the highest functioning that are paid the $9 to do that kind of care. And one problem they have is turnover, so they can't keep people hired. And so my dream is that the community would give those workers that are paid minimum, support them so that they stay. And they stay because they're paid at a higher rate. But you don't have to go into the business and say, we're going to demand that you, instead of paying them, now it would probably, instead of paying them $11 an hour, you have to pay them $15. What we would do is have businesses and all that say, at longevity moments, when you've worked 3 months, you get a free oil change and you get a gift card to Food Lion. And it needs to be things that they actually would spend money on. It doesn't need to be something, to hang on the wall. It needs to be things they can use, so that's actually paying them money. But then you're not promising people money.
And actually, it's not rewarding them.
For sticking around. And then the other thing you can do is that if the workers are recognized for their kindness and good work, they get rewarded again for doing a good job. And then the community's coming around the facilities that aren't. And I'm not being critical at all of Galloway. I think Galloway is the place to be if you can afford to be in Galloway. But then the facilities that don't get as much support from their ongoing pay, from Medicaid and such, then they're actually supplemented by the community. And then if the activity director, is fully supported by the community, then the activity director who's overworked because they can't afford to have 3 activity directors, then you have craft people who come in and help with crafts and outings and things like that. And
you're describing the ideal.
That's why I call it a dream,
It is a dream.
But that's actually only a matter of heart and organization. I'm not talking about anything that doesn't already exist and that everyone can't already see would be a good thing to do. So,
I love that.
So all it is coordinating care. So anyway, we'll decide what to do as needs grow.
Is that your dream?
Yeah, that's how I understand Life Compass living at the, around a nursing facility. Then there's Life Compass living as congregational care. What kind of support and security do you have as a member of our congregation? And how do we work together to guarantee that our members aren't homeless or our members aren't going without? And if the support systems we all pitch into as citizens are going to shrink, currently that seems to be the direction. If they're going to shrink, then if we're going to be the church, it's going to cost us more money out of our pockets to actually keep our church members from being devastated, because there'll be less support. So in my mind, the time for Life Compass was always yesterday and last decade. But Life Compass, originally I wrote it in church language, thinking the church would just be happy to do it. And then I realized that if you write it in church language, then a lot of people you're trying to help pull back because they think you're just trying to convert them into your religion instead of just help them. And so instead of calling it a covenant, I called it a Life Compass plan, because what Christ calls us is into a covenant with God and with all of our neighbors, with the poor. That covenant is what we're actually called to live. But if you invite somebody to talk and you're like, I have mindfulness as part of flourishing in my book. Well, originally it was prayer to discern the will of God. Well, turns out if you approach people with prayer to discern the will of God, they think all you're interested in is converting them. When really what we're saying is everybody has to have a time where you sit by yourself, decide who you're going to be and how you're going to live. And, we believe that an intimate personal relationship with the Spirit of God is the best way to approach that. But even before then, you're deciding whether to get in a fight on the kindergarten playground, long before you have all those eyes to see. So anyways, I'm turning into a preacher. But anyway, the Life Compass process that I built applies to every group, every grouping, a household, a neighborhood. Like I worked with a neighborhood in Hillsboro who wanted to just be good neighbors. So, they started having meetings and saying, okay, what does it mean to be in this neighborhood, and how do we check on each other? Who wants to be checked on? Who doesn't? And you build a neighborhood, or you can build an extended family using it, or you can build a congregation using it. You can build a friendship group, like the Golden Girls. I use that as an illustration. That was just, they weren't all related. And they illustrated how you can share a life. But anyway,
I didn't mean to get you off.
woo, but no, I'm sorry.
I really got him off.
Yeah, but just remember, when I started talking about this, I started researching this in 2013. I started testing it in 2016,
Wow.
and I wrote my book in 2020. So if I start going off about it, I've spent way too much time to be quiet. If I have a chance to explain it, I think I'm explaining the kingdom of God in language everyone can use. That's how I understand my work. Look at the Life Compass Plan assessment, this form that's there. Just so you know, before we start, I can't check very true for even the majority of all these. So, but what I'm proposing is that if we get not only what we're talking about in this class, which is more about the stewardship of life, death, and legacy, if we actually were to implement the full process that I built, then this would be a way to say, like, where are we in terms of, I would call it our discipleship, because I think we are disciples in our household. I think we're disciples in our community. I think we're disciples in the church. I think we're disciples in the world. And we tend to just relate to how much wealth we have and then love others as we can. And Jesus was clear, if you put wealth at the front end of your discipleship, it's one way to go, but you can't serve both wealth and God. But you can use wealth. So you never have a plan without wealth, right? It's just, who's the Lord? Is the Lord the chasing of wealth, or is your Lord the chasing of the kingdom of God? And which way are you going? So this, I'm just saying, that's the Christian language I would use, but here's the way it works out practically. Protection, this first one, I understand what is needed to protect my legal and healthcare interests while I'm living and to protect the interests of my heirs after I'm gone. And then you would think, again, we're not sharing out loud, but is that very true, or is it not at all true? If you do your first folder, then it would be at least somewhat true, if not very true. Person, I am clear about my values, how they influence my decisions, and what I can do to pass them along to the next generation. Is that true as a person? People, I can name 10 people, spouse, family, friends, neighbors, I can rely on for intimacy, friendship, and support. And you remember I told you that now the average answer is I know 3 people who would support me, and the most common answer is 0. There are plenty of people that, if I fell out on, the way I say it to clients is, if you fall out on the ground right now, you fell out on the ground, who would show up and stay till you didn't need help? And there are plenty of people who the answer is 0. You know,
That actually happened.
it happened to you.
So there's someone around, was anyone there to help you?
Yeah.
That's when I broke my leg.
What happened?
Yeah.
I went, we had just finished a course on how not to fall.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but that's
I
funny. Yeah.
stepped over something and said, moving it. I broke in the top. And on the way down, I have knee replacement in that knee.
Okay.
It's never right. It won't bend but so far. I thought, well, I'll catch myself. My knee popped mid-air. And I lay there, tried to call him. He didn't keep his phone. He didn't keep his phone on. I called the neighbor. She was out of town. I called somebody else. They were out of town. I finally got a neighbor who said, well, I'm out of town, but my husband's home. So I called him my night, get rich, I'm ready to pick up the truck.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
were you lying there?
Well, I kept thinking it'll get better, I'll get up.
But you couldn't get up.
Yeah.
I couldn't get up.
Wow.
But luckily,
Well,
you had your phone.
Yeah. Let's keep moving. I want to get through my content, but the thank you very much. And that's exactly what my wife's sister is still in the hospital for. She fell, or her prosthetic knee malfunctioned, and she fell and had to get help. But anyway, so the people and then place, I have a sense of where, how, and with whom I want to live as I age and how to make it happen. I know what I need to maintain my health, remain active, protect my brain, and feel at my best as I grow older. The goal is to live long and die short. In fact, I saw a brand new article I hadn't read yet that popped up yesterday on not living long but living healthy. And so because if the healthier you live, the shorter time you spend dying. So and it used to be the average was really short between when people retired and when they died. That's why Social Security was set up to start at age 65, because most people died by 65. And so it was only supporting people who had very short time to live. And now Social Security has a lot more stress on it, because what was intended to support people for a very short time is now supporting people for 20 or more years. And so it's been stretched to beyond its purpose. But anyway, then I know I'm clear about my options for continued work beyond midlife, whether for income, to remain active, or to use my skills for a useful purpose. I have a good idea of how much money I could need for the rest of my life and where it will come from and how to manage it. I know myself well enough to see how my past connects to my future and where to start in determining what comes next in my life. And that's more intended for younger people. I've had some young people wake up thinking about that. And then the plan is, I have a plan in place that addresses all of these items covered in 1 through 8, and review it and update it regularly. And I'm just saying, most people don't have a life plan, and so they're mostly afraid in the present because of lacking an eternal security and a momentary presence of the full love of God. And so it's hard to do that. Let's look at this week's lesson, estate and probate. And I put a lot of words because I want you to have them. You could go to the state websites and just copy and paste them like I did back a long time ago. But an estate is all your property, so everything you own. So it's money, property, business, art, and when I mean property, like, my 3 Martin guitars are, worth a lot for a guitar, and who gets them matters to me. I've named them all. When you name an instrument, you want to decide where it goes. But anyway, estate plan, how you will manage your estate and pass on your estate at your death using the available resources, professionals, and strategies. It will also include your advanced directives, your first folder that we've talked about last time, and naming guardians for minor children. So an estate plan, you need to know you have one already. The state of North Carolina and the process of probate has a plan. And there's a way in which next of kin is involved and things like that. So if you want, you can die in North Carolina intestate, it's called, without a last testament. If you die intestate without a will, the state of North Carolina, your whoever thinks they're supposed to help with it will establish that you died in the clerk's office, and then there'll be there's a process, and you can look it up if you want. I stopped just teaching the process because it ended up being we spent too long debating the process. But there's actually a way to do that. And if you look it up and it's exactly what you would want, then maybe you don't have to spend much money setting it up. But then so your estate plan is already there. But you can establish a will. A will or testament is a legal document by which a person, the testator, expresses his or her wishes as to how his or her property is to be distributed at death, and names one or more persons, the executor, to manage the estate until its final distribution. It may also express wishes in regard to other matters, including funeral plans. Now, to remember that if it's not your property, you can put it in your will, but there's no legal obligation for anyone to do anything that's not in your control before you die. In your control before you die. So you could put in there, I'd like my funeral to be da-da-da. There's no legal requirement for that funeral to be paid for or planned or anything. But it's good to have it there. It's sometimes people choose to put it in their will. You can just put it in a funeral plan, like I'll give you the form to do, and just tell whoever's going to be around that that's what you want. So you can put things in your will, but it's important to know if you didn't already have control of it before you died, your will won't give you control of it. You know, like I request that my cousin get sober. You know, that you're not in control of that. But you can put anything you want in your will, but the main thing is what happens to everything you have control over. Money, property, businesses, things like that. Like yesterday, I was invited to start talking to farmers in North Carolina about helping with succession plans for farms, because there are many farmers whose children don't want to be farmers, and they'd rather their land not be abandoned or developed. They would like it to continue to be dedicated and farm. And then how do you do that as part of an estate to succeed so anyway, I had that conversation yesterday, and now we're following up to see if Life Compass could help people with succession plans. But anyway, so, and then probate, the legal process whereby a will is proved in a court and accepted as valid public document that is the true last statement of the deceased. The granting of probate is the first step in the legal process of administering the estate as a deceased person, resolving all claims and distributing the deceased person's property under a will. A probate court decides the legal validity of a testator's deceased person's will and grants its approval, also known as granting probate to the executor. The probate will then becomes a legal instrument that may be enforced by the executor in the law courts if necessary. A probate also officially appoints the executor or personal representative, generally named in the will, as having legal power to dispose of the testator's assets in the manner specified in the testator's will. However, through the probate process, a will may be contested. So first, before the contested statement, because I want to get to that, first thing to know is that my dad died. I took his will to the clerk's office, showed him his will. We filled out the form, probate began. I was named the executor because I was named in my dad's will to be the executor. At that point, have been appointed by North Carolina to do what's in that will, which is fidelity to everything my dad owned, doing what my dad said it should do. So he has his red Ford Fusion, and he still owes some money on it. But I don't want the red Fusion. So I have to contact the bank where he has his loan and let them come get the car. And then that is off of it. Then, I have to stop all of his subscriptions to things that are taken out of his bank account every month. I have to settle with Social Security, so I get his $250 final check it's intended to be like a funeral arrangements thing, but you can tell how long that's been the amount. But anyway, you get the $250 from Social Security. Then you go through it. There's a process, and thankfully you can get a form, a several-page form from the clerk's office that tells you what to do. And then everything moves according to my dad's wishes. I'm an only child, so that was one time when it was less complicated. Most of the time, being an only child is a bigger burden when your parents are dying. But after they're dead, it's simpler. If you're in good relationship with your parents, it's simple. Like everything goes to George or to the grandkids or whatever. But anyway, and then go ahead, Kathy.
And you took this, the certificate of death.
And you have the death certificate with you,
Yes.
and the will, and thank you, Kathy. That's exactly right. And then the thing about being contested in North Carolina, there are two things that are guaranteed a jury trial. You're guaranteed a jury trial in North Carolina if you've been accused of capital punishment crimes and for a contested will. So just remember that if whatever degree of certainty you have about your will being done correctly and to be a will that's enforceable, if it's contested, it goes in front of a jury, and you can understand the vulnerability of your will in the face of a jury who might be convinced by some people that you might have wanted something else. And so when I say I would use forms or an attorney written specifically for the state of North Carolina, and I would get them put in place, and I would make sure the people involved know about it, where it is that you have it, so that they're not surprised by its existence, where they can say confidently, this is the will, that this is George's will, and this is, and he told us all where it was and what it was. So if anybody claims there's another one, we don't think that's true because he told all of us where the current one was. You see, so that makes it more secure. And do not put it in a safety deposit box, because by law, if you have your will in a safety deposit box, the minute you die, the safety deposit box is supposed to be locked and not opened until by your executor. And how can your executor gain efficient access to the safety deposit box if the document that makes them the executors in the safety deposit box? So,
leave them the key, right?
Do what?
You have to leave them the key if you're gonna do that.
Well, if you leave them the key, but they're still not supposed to let anybody but you get in your safety deposit box.
I did not know that.
So I'm not saying you can't keep a copy in your safety deposit box as a backup so people would know, yes, that's the real one, because I'm going to keep a copy of the real and latest
You're
one.
gonna
And
keep that notarized
the
somewhere.
original notarized copy, you keep it where the persons named as executors know where it is and how to get it. Might even let them keep it in their house in a fireproof box,
Yes.
because you don't need it when it's needed. You don't need it. And if your spouse is there, you keep it in your own house if you think your spouse will outlive you, and you're not going to die in the same car wreck. But
So you're saying when one person's left, they should turn the will over to the executor?
always the executor. You can make your spouse the executor.
But I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
Debbie's, say still living, instead of her keeping the will, give it to the other.
That's one of the ways to keep it secure. There are multiple philosophies on how you keep your will secured at the best place. Another option is the lawyer that drew it up keeps it in the law office, and then you make sure the law office doesn't close, because I had one client that the law office closed and there a lot of things were gone. But anyway, the idea.
When you move away and the lawyer is in a separate town.
You are now opening up the can, and so here's the rule. The current notarized version of the will, accessible to the executor or executors named in the will, and always kept current, And if you always keep it current, if it hadn't been sitting there for 20 years, it'd be like, where is that? Well, you know. But if you just make sure that it's kept current, the will itself, what's in it is what you still want. And the people named in it that you want to know, because you could name somebody, you can name a cousin you hadn't talked to in a year. But the people that are going to be part of moving it through, including your executor or executors, make sure they know what's in it, so they're not surprised by the real will they're executing. And also make sure they know where it is. And one option is that the executor named in Tammy and I's wills would keep it in a fireproof box at their house rather than us keeping it in a fireproof box in our house. Notice I kept saying fireproof. And but it's okay for it to be in a fireproof box at our house as long as the executor named knows where it is. What needs to happen is when you die, the executor needs to have the will, have the death certificate, walk into the clerk's office and give it to him.
Does it have to be the original or a copy?
Original, at the clerk's office, original. Copies are helpful in informing people and helpful in following through with the will. Like some people will say, is that really what he wanted? And you can say, here's a copy. Read it for yourself.
The lawyer kept the original and we only have a copy. Is that normal?
As long as you can access the original when the death occurs. And you can have multiple certified copies. You know,
That was my question.
But that's another process. So
How is
So I have to get the will that they gave me from them in order to take it to the clerk of court.
wherever the original is goes to the clerk of court along with the death certificate. And that's how probate begins.
So we have to hunt down the law office.
Yeah. If you come in with a copy, I'm saying they might start something, but they'll say, look, you need to get us the original.
So
I mean,
George, what's the process of having more than one notarized copy?
I don't want to speak authoritatively on that because that moves me into legal advice. But if you get an attorney to do it, the attorney can make make a certified copy. You can also you want to make sure you have a certified copy and not just two versions of the will. Two copies of the will separately notarized. Because if someone takes the original and initials something on it, it causes confusion.
So the lawyer actually makes a copy of
A certified copy.
certified copy.
So you're notarizing the notarizing, but again, I don't like saying that out loud because I don't want to establish myself as an authority on how to do that.
But ask your lawyer.
But it's part of the advice I give to use an attorney, who knows the laws of the state in which you're establishing your will, is that in North Carolina, it's one of those where you're guaranteed a jury trial if your will's contested. And I have known of multiple contested wills. And the more money involved or the more property involved, because sometimes it's just the only thing this family has left is the house, and it's really a big deal on who gets the house.
Okay, if something happens to me and Bill, he's already been designated executor. Something happens to him, we've got one daughter next and the other daughter next.
Perfect. I was going to say, just you need a succession.
Okay,
Yeah. I wouldn't advise multiple executors,
no.
but you may, in a big estate, you may say more than one executor because they're going to divide up the massive work that has to be done. But like I'm executor on a older friend of mine's will, and he had made sure his son and daughter knew that George is there and he works in it, that I get paid because he's got a fairly large estate that's complex with businesses. And so I'm going to spend some time doing that.
I was executor of both my mom and dad, both of them, because the other two sisters did not want the responsibility.
Yeah, they're,
They didn't want the
I mean, that's why we're here. We're here for this clarity.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be assertive in the stewardship of everything you've been given stewardship of, it includes an estate plan. But I'm not shaming anybody at all who wants to just take the estate plan that North Carolina will give you, because there is a way, because they're not going to leave unclaimed property and unclaimed money. It has to go somewhere, and the state of North Carolina will do it. It's just that if you own it by establishing a will or the rest of the estate plan we're going to talk about, then you can actually direct your property when you die, and you can even set up, we'll talk about it, tools where you can direct your property and assets way beyond your death, but you have to set that up while you're living. So then the trust, look at the next word, trust. A legal entity created by a party, that's the one who establishes the trustor, through which a second party, the trustee, holds the right to manage the trustor's assets or property for the benefit of a third party, a beneficiary. So if something's held in a trust, whenever it's put in the trust, you'll see that there's multiple kinds. But that trust is now you giving that trust, whoever's directing that trust, the same power you had over that piece of property, that amount of money, that account, that whatever. And so there are four main types. Look at it. One is a living trust created by the testor while he or she is alive. So you can dedicate some asset you have, money, property, or whatever, for instance, to a charitable cause while you're living, and you don't pay taxes on any of that money moving around or whatever. You can also dedicate it where it protects it from yourself or from anyone else who might have access to your money or your property. And so there are people who set up trusts. So for instance, I worked with a family recently, got a thank you note 2 weeks ago from them because they set up a living trust and an irrevocable trust to support their adult disabled son. And they named trustees who love him and are young, who will help him because his sister wants to always love her brother, but she doesn't want to manage her brother's life. So, they've now set up a trust and a living and an irrevocable trust to support the life of their son, so he doesn't end up only supported by Medicaid if it continues to exist. And so so anyway, you see how trust can work, so that then all the money they're dedicating to their son isn't treated as an asset taxable, and it's dedicated to their son so it outlives them. Their son continues to get support, protected from everything else after they die. So there's a testamentary trust, and that's one that begins when you die. Testament, last will and testament. So when you die, this trust is set up so that it starts. So like, for instance, Tammy and I had life insurance policies when our kids were minors, and the way it was set up in our will was that all of our life insurance and money was dedicated to finish raising our children, and so was put in a trust for our godparents, the people that would raise our kids if we died, so that didn't get caught up in all the ways that it might be distributed. And then that needed to change once our kids were all financially independent. They didn't need to be treated like minors. So you can have a testamentary trust where I didn't put all the money in the hands of our friends that were going to be godparents unless we died. But if we died, it would be put in their hands. They didn't control my assets till they needed to, which would mean that Tammy and I both died. Then there's a revocable trust. So that's a trust that you put in, and it serves a purpose, but it can be modified. It has less tax protection because it could be switched around, but it's revocable. but it does operate the way it's supposed to operate while it's enforced. And then there's an irrevocable trust that cannot be modified or terminated by the trustor after its creation. So there are people like recently I know somebody who gave a significant piece of property to a church in Wake Forest that one of my best friends goes to, and he's part of the trustee group that is managing it. They don't want to own the property there, so they receive it, but the trust that it's in has certain rules, so they have to know the rules, operate by the rules, and it has to benefit the church. It can't be this or that, and so you can have an irrevocable trust, but that family that put that in place would have had to pay taxes and do everything else on that big piece of property if it wasn't in an irrevocable trust. Because you could see how people would put it in a trust, not pay taxes for a long time, and then revoke it, and then go back to benefiting from the land. And so, does the church rent it to be farmed and take the rental from it being farmed, or do they, anyway. So trusts accomplish things that you want while you're living in a living trust, when you die, and after you die in a testamentary trust, and then it can be all along that revocable or irrevocable. If you're in an irrevocable, then if you put it in when you're living, it's still in place when you die. Irrevocable.
Revocable becomes irrevocable when you die.
Or when somebody wants to do something else. Even the person who says, oh, now I want all that back. Well, okay, you can, but you're receiving it from the trust, so it's treated taxably like a gift because you weren't paying taxes the whole time it was in the trust. So you don't get to put it in a trust and then take it back and avoid all the tax consequences or whatever.
It sounds like to me you're doing away with the will and have to have an estate.
You want an estate plan. That's what this class is about. You want an estate plan so you can accomplish certain things in a will that are real simple. My will, when I die, everything goes to my wife. Believe it or not, there are people that don't want their spouse to get everything. So, yeah.
Is it just a reflection of what the will says? The estate plan?
The will can be part of establishing a testamentary trust. It's like my will can say, all of our assets in the bank at the point at which we die go to Steve and Trish Crane, who are the godparents of our children, for them to use in raising our children. And so it moves. Or I could in the will say it goes into the Fuller Miners Trust established in 1995. And that trust is a testamentary trust. So it doesn't actually exist. It's legally ready, but it doesn't exist till we die. And then when we die, all the money goes into that trust. And that way it's just my friends who are the godparents. But one reason that's important is that testamentary trust has language for if Trish and Steve die on date night. And nothing says they have to live all the way through. So the money to raise our kids, if they don't want to be the godparents or die, the trust can then be passed on with Steve and Trish's intentions on the best people to raise after us would be. So I'm trusting my children to them and giving them assets. So what I want you to see is that an estate plan, the more of an estate you have, the more it behooves us to have a plan that uses, as I read early on, all of the mechanisms to get done what you want to do with your property when you die.
Makes you glad that you don't have a big estate.
Well, actually, And people who have big ones, what I found out is they're used to having big assets, and they know that it takes work to protect them, and
Yeah.
and you have to be very clear on passing them along because people do a lot to grab money.
Oh, yeah,
So you want to be wise about it.
especially families.
What's the cost for the state?
It's not tens of thousands, but it's thousands. You talking about a trust, setting up a trust? Yeah. There are simple trusts that don't cost much, and then there are complex trusts that cost more because the more nuances within the trust, you have to have more language created or at least certified by an attorney and put in enforced legally so that it's secure. Because just like a will, if you have a trust and it's not done well and enforceable, people will challenge it. And I know families who have
Gosh, it's in
who
the
had-
news all the time.
really fought over how the farm was divided up or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, my son had one, he said he paid $1,000.
I've seen plenty that were 1,000, 900, a simple one. I just want this.
Well, I don't have a lot of assets, so.
Well, and you can have a lot of assets and keep it simple. Everything goes here. It's real simple.
Yeah, taxes.
Yeah. There you go. And so estate tax is worth talking about. You don't have any estate taxes in North Carolina. So no matter how big your estate is, you don't pay taxes when your estate's moved. Federal estate taxes, you have taxes once your estate's worth more than $13,990,000.
I'm close.
After that, and I would just like to say the families I've known that paid federal estate taxes, it was mostly property that created that.
Yeah.
As if you have a dairy farm in Wake County and you die, and somebody says, how much is that 500 acres worth in Wake County? You have estate taxes, federal estate tax. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And they're living in a simple house milking cows. You see what I'm saying? And so they don't live rich, but the estate becomes big because they own property. Anyway, so then the gift tax exclusion. This is a great way to help get where you want to go if it's fits you. You can give $19,000 each year to an individual, and it's a gift, so they don't pay taxes on it and you don't pay taxes on it. And so there are people who want things to move on to people, and the way they do it is they just annually give them a gift. And I knew one family that gave the gift of that much equity in the home place to their child. So they were given $19,000 of the home place equity each year until their child owned the home place. And it would take a long time now because houses and homes are worth a lot more than they used to be. But that way, and remember one thing that I like to have out there is that if you can really trust people, there's less necessity for a trust. If you can really trust them, but remember that the reason you have to trust them is the minute the property becomes in their control, they can do whatever they want. So you have to trust them to do what you want. And so just know you're giving over control, but I could say to Steve, back when our kids were minors, here, Steve, you're going to get this much money. Use it to raise the kids. Good luck.
If you plan to do the $19,000 a year to each individual, you kind of have to know when you're going to die to make sure you can.
Well, you can make a guesstimate and act accordingly, or if there's money or property that you want them to end up with anyway, then it may not matter when they get it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you give assets bigger than that in a chunk, then you have to declare it. So
$15,000.
yeah, when I started doing this, it
That
was
doesn't have to be cash, that can be interest in a property, in other words.
that you're giving them that value. Yep. Okay, then what estate plans can accomplish utilizes the available strategies in securing your wishes regarding your estate. We've talked about that. It lets people know what you wanted. It names the guardians of minor children. It can secure the financial support of minor children. You may avoid probate in part or in full. Like if you have an estate plan and you have payable on death for a checking account, like I was a signature on my dad's checking account, and all I ever did was what he told me to do. But when he died, that became my checking account, and it didn't have to go through probate.
Yeah.
But you have to sign. You have to sign. But all they do in the bank office is click a box, and then whoever's on the checking account gets the balance when the person dies. So once I came in with a death certificate to the bank, I became the sole owner of his checking and savings account, and it didn't have to go through probate.
Well, and you as an only child, where there's 3 in my family.
It can be
2
complicated.
of the girls, it wasn't complicated, we just divided. We divided it.
Like if you trust everybody, you can give everything to one person, and they divide it like you said.
We've never had an issue.
Well, what document do you need to go to the bank account
you just need to go in there,
and tell them that?
tell them it's what you want to do, and some of them, like where we banked SunTrust at the time, they had my dad, who was the only one on the account at that time. They had my dad sign, and then I did my signature and became on the bank. And when I went on, they clicked the thing that said.
You might have to send a form to the person.
I would just ask the bank, and the bank will tell you how to do it because it's very routine.
Yeah.
It's the same as cars.
Yeah.
Now they actually, when I started, it wasn't true, but now on car titles, if 2 people are on the title, you can just check a box that it goes either way. Because if you don't, and you have a car worth $20,000, and one of the 2 people on the title dies, technically, $10,000 is in the estate, and $10,000 is owned by the other person on the title. And so the estate has to actually transfer the $10,000 of value for the car.
You know, the really good thing about if your parents at the time,
Uh-huh.
they turned everything over to you before they died.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking.
That's so important.
That is an estate plan. You see what I'm saying? That's a plan for how the estate gets distributed, and you can distribute everything before you die and be renting your own house from your kids.
Exactly.
I've known that to happen.
Yeah.
and so yeah.
You signed to sign your check.
You can't. Let's keep going. I want to make sure I get done. I'm going slow this time. Everything we're saying is worth saying. So, you can direct how much, how, and when people receive money and property from your estate. You can help the people and the causes you name in your estate avoid taxes. Just remember, using trust or in your will, you can actually say what happens or where it goes. You can avoid disqualifying individuals from losing support of ongoing programs based on available assets. I have a friend who had an uncle who died, and he had 2 disabled sons who one was living in a group home because he was severely disabled, and he was an adult and he liked being in his own place, and so he was living in a group home, and this well-meaning uncle left a big chunk of money to the disabled adult man, and he became disqualified for the group home he was in because he had too much money.
Oh, yeah.
And so if he had set up a trust and the trust was giving him an allowance to spend, which is really what he had in his mind was, he'd be able to do some more things he wanted to do. If he had planned ahead and had someone he trusted just give Joseph, $100 a month to spend on things he wants as a gift, or if he'd set it up to give him a $19,000 gift every year. You see what I'm saying? If he thought ahead, they wouldn't have created the crisis, but he created a crisis for a disabled adult. Names and supports minors and adult members of blended families in harmony with how you view each relationship and personal situation. You can imagine blended families and how my children, your kids, our kids, you can include long-term care plans for yourself and your spouse based on your anticipated needs and desires. Start early because the look-back period and the affordability of insurance.
It keeps going up.
Yeah, it's 5-year look-back now, and they're going to move it to 7, I think.
Now, how does the look back affect insurance for long-term care?
Well,
They say you shouldn't have bought the.
no, it doesn't affect the insurance. The look-back period is how your funds are transferred. So there are plenty of people whose strategy is, I want to be on Medicaid so that my family doesn't spend as much money on my long-term care. And in order to be qualified for Medicaid, you have to have $2,000 or less in your name. Unless you buy insurance. Remember when we talked about long-term care insurance, you can keep $300,000 if you have $300,000 worth of long-term care insurance. But so what I'm pointing to here is that if you're doing the $19,000 a year and you end up qualifying for Medicaid and they look back, there's nothing to find. But there are people who move property that has value and money to people just to qualify for Medicaid, and their kids supplement it if they can be trusted to. They supplement it and keep mom in the home place. I say mom because the general path is that the men die first and the women have less resources while they face the end of life. And so what I'm saying is that now they look back 5 years because people are strategizing, and you can. The moral question is that hiding money so that every citizen of the United States pays for your long-term care. Is it a way to access a program you paid into your whole life? And so you have something coming back, and so you get to it. The way the program is intended, Medicaid, Social Security, not Medicare, Medicare's health insurance, but Medicaid and Social Security were intended to avoid people dying in ditches and being tossed aside by family and dying in misery. Medicaid and Social Security were not intended as retirement plans for Social Security or health care plans for poor people. Medicaid is a Good Samaritan law. Social Security was a Good Samaritan law, that we just don't let people end up with nothing, dying without any kind of support. We don't let that happen. Now that's what the Senior Adult Act that was put in place a while back.
Have they increased the age where you can obtain Social Security?
Yeah.
It keeps going up.
It keeps going up because remember, it was originally planned that you would have it for less than a year. When they made 65, when you start Social Security, life expectancy was 64 and a half years. Now you were starting at 65 and life expectancy was 79. And the amount of money that comes out of the fund for 14 years is very different than 6 months. And of course, anyway, I don't want to get into my personal philosophy on how to handle those things. But anyway, so it can include your long-term care. So one thing you could do is your estate plan, like we talked about with long-term care. You can say in your will that you've documented how many hours everyone spent taking care of you at the end of life, and your will, the executor pays them per hour for what they did, and then the rest of it gets divided this way. You can actually, if you don't have liquid money, cash to pay people as they go, but you're going to have money when your estate's settled, you can dedicate it to the people who took care of you at the end of life. no matter who they are. And then it can create a succession plan for businesses and ownership, and a farm is a business, so legal issues. It can review the full use of your property and how your assets can best support yourself, your loved ones, your legacy now, at your death, and long into the future. Many ongoing trusts support huge good things all over the place. And you can start a trust with very little money, what one might sound like very little money, that actually does a lot of good. So for instance, if you can drill a well where people don't have clean water for $1,000, and you could set up a fund where every time the earnings on that fund get $1,000, it drills another well for people that don't have clean water. You see what I'm saying? You could decide, I'm going to do a great deal of good for a community where they don't have clean water, but all it takes is every time my trust earns $1,000 of interest, that $1,000 goes here, and then when it earns another $1,000, it goes there again. You can do a lot with a little. Protect family from conflict that rises out of undesignated property and lack of knowledge of your desires. So my big advice is everyone needs to know what you want, and then you need to make it happen so that they don't have any unnecessary disagreement on what you wanted, and they don't have any capacity to change what you want. Do you see the two things?
Yeah.
The conflict over what you wanted, just make it clear to whoever needs to know, and then you want to put it legally in place so they can't change it. And contested wills get in front of a jury. So somebody can cry real hard and say some things that they are saying they remember you saying, and convince a jury. So that's why you put it in place. What estate plans cannot accomplish: you cannot avoid the applicable laws. Finding out later is costly. You cannot create additional resources. Remember the value of insurance. So you could say, well, everything in an insurance policy, a life insurance policy, becomes available when you die. Yes, but the earlier you buy it, the cheaper it is. So the benefit to your estate has to do with how efficiently you buy the insurance. If you're not independently wealthy and don't need insurance. And, just remember, everyone who doesn't feel a need for public insurance, like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and those kind of things, for themselves or people they desperately love, are independently wealthy. That, by definition, you don't need your neighbors to help you. You have enough money where you don't need all your neighbors to help you. And so all the people who are not independently wealthy, in order not to end up totally abandoned or bankrupted by your medical costs, have to depend on ways in which we all support each other. Like I say to people, none of you individually, unless you're crazy rich, could afford the roads you drove here on. You couldn't build the roads, just the ones you were on getting here. You individually couldn't build them. So we have to decide ourselves, what we do together. And when it comes to end of life, long-term care, and end of life estates, I think it's very important to understand how we're all in it together. Protect the family from unresolved conflicts and mutual claims not addressed in the estate plan. And then I put residuary clause. You can, in a residuary clause, say, my Martin D35 named Marty goes to my son Trip. My Martin J40 6 string goes to, you see what I'm saying? You can do that as much as you want. And it's the obligation of your executor to do that. You can say all my property goes, and you just let the person distribute it. Strategies in estate planning for most people. One is a will. You can use that. And estates $20,000 and less are cheaper. The filing fees are less, and they're a lot simpler. My dad's estate was $2,002. Because beyond the checking account and savings account that I got when he died, after I got paid for everything, and his estate was $2,002. And so it was a small estate. You can set up your property accounts, beneficiaries, and everything where you can have quite a bit in your estate, but almost none of it goes through probate. Because it's beneficiaries, survival on death with your, like your automobile, and you can, in other words, you can do that, use your will. Joint ownership, transfer on death titles, gifts during lifetime that we talked about, charitable, non-charitable. In other words, you can give to charity and get a tax credit if it's charitable, but you can also give to non-charitable. I give to an education thing that's for profit, but I believe in what they educate people on, so I help them do that. But anyway, so personal strategies of just passing on what you want as you want it. My dad collected Beanie Babies. I mean, crazy. I mean, obsessively collected Beanie Babies. And when he was starting to have dementia and we were having our end of life conversation, says, "What do you want me to do with your Beanie Babies?" He said, "I'll take care of it." And I was like, okay. And I thought maybe he was going to dump them at the Goodwill or something. And he started, but everybody that came to see him, he gave them a Beanie Baby. And he would try to think of a Beanie Baby that fit him in some particular way. And he just started giving Beanie Babies. He went to church with bags of Beanie Babies, and the kids, he would give every kid a Beanie Baby. And he got rid of those Beanie Babies. And when we had his memorial service, there were people there bringing their Beanie Babies. And we had a whole bunch of Beanie Babies at the now. And I don't know what it is you have of value that you just want to pass on personally, but you can do it. Trust, you got the living trust, testamentary, irrevocable. People and professionals that can help you. One of your core relationships that support you in life. Remember, if you trust people, you can just give them things and they'll do what you want. You can get support in life. You can cover expenses of their support. So the people you love, you can say, here's how we're going to help you through this, and here's how we're going to help. Isn't it interesting that we throw showers and come around babies, but we don't throw showers and come around end of life? And the needs of a dependent human, beginning and end. The beginning and the end. And it seems to me that you have a lot of people come around you at the beginning of life, dependent life, with a baby or minor children, and you get abandoned taking care of people at the end of life.
I understand.
It is abandonment, isn't it?
Yes.
And it may be the way you planned it. I'd say in my big seminar, I raised my kids to leave me, and now I'm second guessing. Yeah. As I told them to find a career and chase it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They did, and they made their grades and found a career, and
Yes.
they fulfilled my dream.
Yes.
They're happy living somewhere.
Yes.
I just wish it was, across the street. And you could support their future. So what would it be like if families and congregations, this is my dream as a minister, actually had a mutuality, a reciprocity in which there were promises kept by more than just two people in a household? That promises were made and kept by communities and extended families. And that's my dream.
It would be a different world, wouldn't it?
You need a financial advisor so you can build wealth to include your retirement, your long-term care, your tax strategies, your goals for the second half of life.
Now, what does encore there mean? Just after retirement, or?
Encore. So for instance, when I wrote a book and retired from full-time pastoring and started Life Compass stuff, and I'm trying to do it, that's encore. You see the encore? Like the next thing I'm doing, because I've gotten to a certain place in life, now I'm actually, doing work and trying to build a business that does good in the world. I see it as a ministry, but that does good in the world, and it's my encore. Because from 1977 until 2024, I was a minister in a church. And now it's my encore. And there's a whole encore movement. You can just do a Google search and start having all kinds of fun with everybody who's doing their encore. There are people retiring and joining the Peace Corps. There are people retiring and going on mission trips and funding habitat houses. And Jimmy Carter showed you encore. He did an encore. That's what I mean by that. Estate attorney, elegant estate plan. I have a class called Elegant Estate Planning, which is about tying your legacy to your estate plan. But you want an elegant estate plan, which can be very complex but elegant, right? Something can be elegant and very complex. Ask a quilter. If complex can be beautiful, and you got to get it all just right and put it all together just right, And so you'll say, "Oh, that's a quilt." Well, that reduces it down to sound simple. I'm married to a quilter, and I know how many weeks and months she spent on that sucker, and it was not simple. It was elegant, and people when they take their breath, when they go, it's very complex. Elegant estate plan, reduce work. Tax advisor, coordinate your budget, your plans for living, and your estate plan based on tax implications. I wish tax advisors helped everyone pay their fair share, and instead they're viewed as something to help us avoid taxes. I wish we had a simple tax structure where everybody paid their fair share and everybody loved the fact that no one was left in a ditch in America, and loved the fact that you can't suffer without support, and that you don't have to be an independently wealthy family to guarantee your family members that they won't be abandoned. But that's my little kingdom of God preaching.
I think the saddest thing in the world is go to a nursing home and find abandoned people.
Yeah, that's my mission. Yep, that's one of the things I see as needing to end. Anyway, insurance agent. There's all kinds of things you can do with insurance. I don't have time to go through all that. I put in there, I need to change it, because originally my work was called Silver Compassion. So I forgot to change the words. It says Silver Compassion Specialist down there. That would be someone trained by me to use the Life Compass. So now it's called Life Compass Living. So it would be me or one of the people I train helping you have a life plan, because that incorporates everything. So you don't have your money isolated from the people you love, how you want to love them, how you want to spend your time, your money, your emotional energy, your witness from a discipleship perspective. It's how you want to be stewards and have your witness. And then an estate plan helps you support those who have needs and while living your own life compass. So whatever your life compass plan, if you have an estate plan, it actually helps you more fully support yourself and the people you love while you're living, and then preserve and pass on what is yours when you die. The estate plan is not just about after you die, because the estate plan helps you gain wealth and protect wealth, which could be property or anything else, while you're living, and then has in it what happens when you die. And then I put 3 things: collect your documents, share your documents, store your documents.
That's important.
So that's it. Let me stop the